Let's get underway. I'm going to start by asking the chair of Difference, Caroline MacDonald, to say a few words of welcome and let you know a little bit more about Difference.
Thanks, Richard. So
thanks.
This is a really exciting day for all of us involved in Difference, and a very proud celebration for us all. It's taken 4 years of work, dreams, belief, blood, sweat, and a few tears to bring Difference from a germ of an idea to an organisation that's already started to pack a punch on behalf of disabled people. Difference started, like many civil rights organisations, when a group of like-minded disabled people came together around a kitchen table to talk about disability rights in the North East. So the region's had a very strong and proud history of disabled people campaigning on behalf of our human rights. But we felt that despite the huge strides made by our forebears, in many ways our rights are stagnating. And in some important areas such as hate crime, access to a fair income, and to the justice system, things have actually started to get worse. So we saw the need for an independent, unifying, regional voice for disabled people, free to speak out and campaign on the issues that are important to us. It's taken us some time to get the foundations in place, such as forming a constitution and becoming a charity, and securing funding from the Community Foundation and the National Lottery Community Fund. But we received a huge boost when Dame Tanni Grey-Thompson agreed to be our patron. We've been re-energised as new trustees came on board. We eventually outgrew my kitchen table and needed to meet in bigger venues, as we've been joined by a very talented staff team and now have a team of very experienced and committed trustees in place. So this year we've started our campaigning work in earnest, focusing on how our lives have been impacted by the response to the coronavirus pandemic. Firstly, with our digital inclusion programme, and now, as hopefully you'll all have seen in the media in the past few days, by coming together with other disability organisations to launch the Manifesto for the New Normal, our report explaining how disabled people can and should be empowered to have full lives as we embrace our changing society. So today is a celebration of how far we've come, a chance to celebrate and enjoy some of the wonderful disability arts and artists we have in the North East, and a chance to plan the next phases of our work. It's very important to us that the work and campaigning we do at Difference is led by our members, and we look forward to speaking to you all in our breakout groups to understand the issues most important to disabled people right now and how we should shape and focus our work in the months and years to come. So please enjoy our performances and debates and contribute to our workshops, and I look forward to meeting new friends and old throughout the morning. Thank you.
Our next section of the event is a Q&A panel, and this is going to be chaired by Christopher Hartworth, our development director. And we're really grateful to our panelists. We've got an excellent panel of people from around the region with real expertise and lived experience of disability. So would like to just briefly introduce our patron, legendary Paralympian Baroness Tanni Grey-Thompson, Chief Executive of Cumbria Northumberland Tyne and Wear NHS Foundation Trust, which is a bit of a mouthful, John Lawler. We have Emma Lewell-Buck, who is the Labour MP for South Shields. Welcome to Emma. We have author, actor, poet, activist, and all-round creative, lovely person, Lisette Orton. Hey, Lisette. And we have another trustee from Difference, David Barker, who is works for United Response and previously has been Chief Executive of Springboard and of the Percy Headley Foundation. So I'm going to hand over to Christopher for this part of the event.
Hi, that's the first glitch out of the way? Okay, I'll start again. So this session is about everyday disableism, So this is the instances that every disabled person experiences, and they're the micro aggressions or instances where you experience barriers, but they're kind of small and you get used to them. So as a wheelchair user, it's every time that a drop curb is parked in front of, it's when I'm waiting for a lift, thinking about nothing in particular, and someone comes down and presses the button and says, my daughter's disabled as well. It's all of these small things that happen, and you think, did that happen to me? Was that a bad thing? No. And you just get to live with it. It's these microaggressions. I think it's very similar to the Me Too movement, the women's feminist movement, to highlight all of the times which you experience as a disabled person, these kind of small disabling microaggressions which kind of bring it home to you how crap it is for you sometimes. Has anyone else experienced this, David? As someone with a kind of a missing a limb, but you can use a prosthetic, and so that can kind of make that disappear. Do you still experience that?
Yes, I was reminded of a time I was in a shop in Hartlepool buying a pint of milk for my mum. I wasn't wearing my prosthetic leg at the time. I was on crutches, and the woman in the shop said to me, "Oh, you are brave." Now, my first thought was that there'd been something in the news about poisoned milk. My second thought was just the very act of being in Hartlepool sometimes does require a certain amount of bravery. But actually what she was saying was I was brave to go to the shop and buy a pint of milk. Now, she probably thought she was paying me a tribute or a compliment. She may have thought I was, ex-military or something, and she thought she was showing me respect. You could argue that she did me no harm, apart from the fact that she's got completely the wrong impression of me. I am not brave. I am a coward. I come from a long line of cowards. It's probably why it's a long line. What she did was she made the wrong assumption about me. And the idea that people can make the wrong assumptions about people just because they're missing a limb or something doesn't work properly, that's prejudging, it leads to prejudice, and that can lead to discrimination, and that can lead to harm.
Okay. What about anybody else? Has anyone else experienced the microaggressions, these instances that we're talking about? Tanni, I know this happens to you because I read about it on your Twitter account.
Yeah, so I agree with what was said before about sort of social media. There are all swings and roundabouts with it. For me, it's been quite useful to use it to highlight the absolute daily level of low-level discrimination that I get. So before lockdown, I was getting on the tube to go to Parliament. It was rush hour, and a member of staff said to me, perhaps you might like to travel when it's less busy because there are people commuting to work and they've got important jobs to go to. And it was like, yeah, okay. So I said, well, I work in Parliament. And he said, oh, lovely. I said, yeah, actually, I'm just going to try and sort of dismantle the government today. And he's like, oh, lovely. Oh, we'll try and travel when it's quieter. So there's so many layers to that, with actually thinking as a disabled person, I don't have a job, and actually not listening to the answer. I was going to talk a bit about this later, but not listening to what I said. And what I found in lockdown actually is my tolerance level normally has to be pretty high. I have to have a lot of resilience. I have to find solutions for non-disabled people to make them feel better about patronising me. And in lockdown, that's gone. The little bottle of resilience. So I'm slightly over, I think, making non-disabled people feel better about patronising. I still try and do it in a really polite way and not be aggressive. But for me, I've had 6 months where I've not experienced any discrimination at all. And it's amazing. And actually that's what I want the rest of my life to be. Not tolerating it because I don't want to be seen to have a chip on my shoulder, but actually really sort of do something differently about it.
I'm going to just lead in here to my first question, because the question is, why do you think it still happens? just using your example of the tube journey, in that case, we're an inconvenience. You're an inconvenience to other people. People, in that case, it happens because, well, yeah, people don't want you around to be in their way, and they want you to be somewhere else. Do you think it's more than just convenience why it still happens?
I think it's just, sadly, still just lack of understanding about disabled people, whether that's our portrayal in the media or the voice of disabled people, or around the election. There were very few stories about how welfare and austerity were affecting disabled people. It's just continual. And as an ex-athlete, I have to be very grateful for the platform it's given me, but not every disabled person in the world wants to be a Paralympian. And that's what they're told, that's the option young disabled people are given. And that we see them every 2 years, winter and summer games, and not a lot in between. Mm. So I think there's things like that make it really difficult. I mean, we do have quite a lot of disabled people in the House of Lords. But if I look around other areas that I work in, or other companies I'm in and out of, I just don't see people with visible impairments. Yeah, I mean, obviously there's invisible impairments, but I would have expected by now to see more disabled. I get really excited when I see a disabled person on TV, and I shouldn't. I shouldn't sort of go, oh, Nikki Fox is on telly. I should be saying, yeah, it's Nikki Fox.
Yeah.
And I think it's just everywhere. And during the pandemic, whether it's compulsory do not resuscitate orders or things like that, and people, because of shielding, it's being hidden. So now is just a really important moment for disabled people to say, hang on a minute, what's going on here?
Yeah. So, opening that discussion up to other people about those everyday disableisms. Lizette, do you have an experience of those everyday disableisms?
My all-time favourite, I've got a top 10 and it changes, but number one is always, so what's wrong with you then? And there's so many bits to just unpick in that one. The first one is, excuse my language, can I be asked today? I'm tired. Do I want to be an educator today? I just like to be me. I don't want to have to do this all the time. And sometimes I'm just too tired to do anything about that. So it depends on my mood as to my answer. Do I want to have a discussion about the social model of disability? How I have an impairment, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with me? Oh, glorious and brilliant and wonderful. It's the world around that causes me issues. And quite frankly, it's also people like you asking me that question that causes me issues. Sometimes I'm kind of trying to get on a bus, or I'm trying to do some work, or I'm trying to be awesome. So sometimes I just nod and smile and move on.
Yeah. I'm shocked when although I experience those things every day as well. When I hear someone else explain it, it's kind of quite shocking. Anyway, so in your case, why do you think those why it still happens to you in those cases? People say that, people are only meaning good things. They're good meaning people. So, you should be happy for them. So why do you think that happens?
I think it's definitely building on what Tanni said, that we're just not visible. And I don't understand why. We have incredible art, incredible stories to tell. We are pioneers. We are making change that changes every life for the better, not just disabled people. And yet we have like a token one person on the telly, or a token one book on a shelf. And we should be apparently incredibly grateful. And that one person should be able to sum everything up amazingly, marvelously, and be the experience of every single disabled person at one time. And they're not. We should be everywhere. And I think if young people at school aren't having friends who are disabled, if that segregation starts right at the beginning, if in workplace you haven't got colleagues who are disabled, then those questions, unfortunately, I understand why they're asked, because we're not visible enough to make sure that they're never asked again.
Yeah. Bringing in my other two participants there, Emma and John, I don't know the nature of your disabilities, if indeed you have disabilities, but have you come into contact with these micro disableisms or big disableisms in your experience?
Do you want me to come in, Christopher?
Yeah.
Morning, everyone. My name's Emma Lilbuck. I'm the MP for South Shields. I've got a condition called dyspraxia, and loads of people don't really understand it, and it's also really complicated to explain. And it's strange because the condition is a developmental coordination disorder, and even those who have dyspraxia find it difficult to explain because our brains just aren't wired in the way that the medical description of what our condition is. I think for me, it generally affects like my thought process, my coordination, and my general movement. And we tend to just view the world slightly differently to everybody else. And what I normally get is when I mention that I have dyspraxia, people will look me up and down and say, but there's nothing wrong with you. And I think, well, I know there's nothing wrong with us. I'm just a little bit different, perhaps. But, it's very patronizing and rude. And then when you try, and often colleagues will stop us in Parliament and say, oh, I've heard you've got this thing called dyspraxia. Tell me about it. So I'll explain it, and they'll laugh and dismiss it and go, oh, I think I've got that too. You think, well, no, you don't, because, you might be, it often gets dismissed as just someone who's clumsy or someone who's a bit off the wall and, thinks outside the box quite a lot. But it's so much more deeper than that. And it's basically, it's how I'm wired. It's fundamentally different how other people are wired. And I find it really frustrating sometimes trying to explain it for one. And then when people just dismiss it and say, but you look fine, there can't be anything possibly wrong with you. I was sat once with a journalist from the Financial Times, and one of our colleagues walked past, and she was doing an interview with us about dyspraxia, and she said she suffers from it too. And our colleague walked past, and for the first time ever, she told someone she works with that she suffered from dyspraxia too. And he did the same thing. He looked at me, looked at her, and said, well, you're supposed to look fine. It can't be that bad. So, it's that kind of thing. It just winds me up a little bit.
I've just looked back at my list of questions. I've got a fair few to get through, so I'm going to crack on. The second question is, do you think we can learn anything from other movements like the Black Civil Rights Movement or the gender equality movement? David, I'm going to bring you in on that one. What do you think?
I think we can, but I think we have to be very careful. I think we need to shout, we need to listen, and we need to speak. As we've already heard, we live in an age when opinion equals fact and when truth doesn't seem to always matter. Social media can be very open and democratizing in that gives everyone a platform, but all of those opinions are seen as equal, even the uninformed ones, and all the opinions are true, even when they're false. And if we look at other civil rights movements, there is a problem there. The more successful the movement is in raising its profile, the more the opposition, the people who don't want civil rights, push a populist agenda and thwart us. So the more successful Black Lives Matter is in highlighting the racial unfairness in America, the more Trump has gained support from a backlash. The more successful Extinction Rebellion is in raising catastrophic environmental danger for all of us, the more there's been an attack on them for disrupting normal life. The more the LGBTQ community campaigns around trans issues, the more aggressive the backlash is. There are 1 million people march for a referendum, and the more they get called undemocratic. Yeah. For every Black Lives Matter T-shirt, there is a Make America Great Again cap. And civil rights was and always will be a battle. It's a battle to gain civil rights, and then it's a hell of a battle to keep those civil rights. That doesn't mean we should give up. We need to learn those lessons. So there is kind of a message of hope. We need people to shout at the edges. We need people to own that social media space and use it positively, but use it. We need people to listen to the arguments that are used against us and then tear them apart. And we need people to talk to others. Because in the end, History will be on our side. We will win.
Folks, if I can just ask you to pause for a second as the interpreters swap over, because it's quite tiring and they need to take breaks. Okay.
Sure, thank you.
Helen, if you could, brilliant. Thank you so much.
Is that it? Can I carry on? Okay, great. That was great, David. That was really brilliant. I'm going to just carry on with the questions just to get through them. I want to bring John in now. I want to ask John, do you think the North East and Cumbria is a better or worse place for disabled people than anywhere else in the UK?
That's a really, really big question, that one, isn't it? I think there's some things sort of structural that probably make it harder than in other parts of the country, which is that we have the highest unemployment rates in the country, in the North East. So if we already have such a disparity between employment rates amongst non-disabled people and disabled people, and you add to that, I think we've got now, we're likely to have about a third higher unemployment rates than the England average. So I think there's a real employment issue that I would observe. We have examples, particularly for people with learning disability and autism that we work with, of some pretty horrendous experiences in sort of the local patch, including hate crimes. So that sort of tends to colour your view about how the North East has got some considerable way to go. Having said that, I'm sure some of that happens elsewhere. On the attitudinal side, you will have told from the accent, I'm not from the North East, it probably feels a little bit better than where I'm from, which is Yorkshire and Humber. So it's a bit of a mixed thing, but we do worry about some of the out and out prejudices. I mean, we have a service up in Morpeth for people with learning disability and autism, and it was agreed one day that the ward staff would order some takeaway food for them, and the food arrived with a little bit of paper stuck to it, saying, I can't believe it was a very derogatory term to describe the people, so we put it that way. So I sort of like get influenced by individual little cases, if you know what I mean. Yeah. But I do think that there's structural stuff around employment, around education, around housing, around benefits. Just because the North East is less well off, I think will almost certainly put greater strain on disabled people and. Whether intentionally or unintentionally, create greater prejudice. Yeah,
that's a good. Yeah, I think I generally feel that it's kind of sometimes it's hard being disabled, but being disabled and poor is a lot harder than it is being disabled. I'm going to bring in our politician now, Emma, if I may. What do you think the role of the government is, I suppose both local and national, in making it more culturally unacceptable to be disabled, to be prejudiced, to be anyway negative towards disabled people?
Well, I think governments often kind of set the agenda, don't they, and set how people behave and how they view people across the country. And what we've seen over the last 10 years is that this hostile environment towards people with disabilities, there's been a raft of really punitive and horrific welfare and benefit changes. There's been, children with SEND are being locked out of education more so than ever before. And all of these things filter down and send the message that, look, your government doesn't care about disabled people, so why should you? And that's where it comes from ultimately. If you look at the disability employment gap, I think it's, for people over 25, it's something like 29%. There was a recent study done by SCORE where they said, and I couldn't believe this, it was my researcher gave us these figures, and she said that 2/3 of British people admit that they feel uncomfortable talking to disabled people and go out of their way to actually not have to be in the same room or encounter anyone with disabilities. Right. I find that just outstanding, considering, I was really proud that my party brought in the Disability Discrimination Act, and you would think that would have went some way to changing things. But really, in reality, like a lot of pieces of legislation, you find it's all great when you're talking about in Parliament. On the ground, it doesn't get delivered, or it just doesn't happen. We need that cultural shift and that change, and it has to come from government. That have to stop demonising disabled people. I mean, every time people with disabilities are mentioned in Parliament, it's about benefits and welfare. people with disabilities are more than benefits and welfare. Why is it that our disabilities minister is in the DWP team? I mean, what does that say to people? What is that telling us about how we view people with disabilities? So in education as well, you know, there was a study done when I was in our shadow education team by the United Nations, and they said that the United Kingdom segregates children with disabilities in special schools more so than anywhere else in the world. So our children are growing up and going to school and not being surrounded by all these amazing, wonderfully diverse people like me with dyspraxia, or, you know, kids with autism. They're not experiencing that. So then when they leave school and they see someone with disabilities, they don't know what to do. They don't know how to handle it. And that's wrong as well, because kids normally are less prejudiced than the rest of us. So, you know, have where possible and where you can, have all children across the piece educated together, because it is possible. You can do it. And, you know, I would rather see an education system that's inclusive instead of exclusive. And I think we can get there one day. And I'd like to see, obviously, I'm a Labour MP. I'd love to see this government gone. I'd love to see some of the policies in our 2019 manifesto come through. But ultimately, I just want to see a cultural shift. And I think until we have that led from the top, led from government, and someone really strong in government saying, you know, this is just not on, these policies and this discrimination that's coming from the top needs to end, then rant over. Thanks.
That's great. Just on that, that's a great segue for me to bring Lizette in for our last question about Emma. You were saying there that the government should be in a leadership role. You know, I think you're totally right, but I think disabled people should lead the change. And so my question to Lizette is, how do you think disabled people should lead that change, that we can change the culture?
The first thing to kind of backtrack on that is the why, and it's nothing about us without us. We are experts in our field. We know what we want, and we will fight for all of us. So, and there are incredible disabled equality strategists that we should be using to put that into place. And they can support other people, but it should be nothing about us without us. We need disabled people in positions of power. And that's not a tokenistic box ticking exercise. It's people who are in positions to creatively and fundamentally drive the narrative for change. And this means being salaried in leadership positions, being on boards, but this means that we need to have the skills to get us into those positions. So it's about training, not tick box training. It's about career paths and progressions, and it's building that into organisations at every level. It's about recognising access needs and meeting them. It's recognising that learning disabled people may need a support worker with them to do that role, but they can, and what they come out with and what we have together will be incredible. It's about bringing people along with you. If you have an opportunity, it's opening it up to more voices at every possible time and bringing them on board with you. It's finding allies. It's allies supporting you, but it's also allies knowing when it's time to step aside. That's really important. And it's the creation of space. It's the acknowledgement to meet all our requirements, because don't think you're doing a good job for doing that. Just do that as standard, because we will show good practice then. We can build networks. We can celebrate our success, and we can show and share the pioneering work that we can do, which makes everything better, not just for disabled people, not just a little enclave of us, but for all people. Because it's amazing the amount of Zooms that I've been in that have somebody like Faye giving guidance and support. It's not just us disabled lot that wants that. Everybody wants that. So we're pioneers. Have more of us.
Okay, excellent. Right, brilliant. On that note, I'm going to, we're back on time, Richard, so I'm happy with that. But it's a great discussion. Thank you so much. I wish we had longer, but brilliant comments. Thank you. Richard, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. That was great. Loads of good points there. That's better. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I'll do it. Just give me a second. So yes, this poem is called Edges. This is a world littered with edges. And I don't mean to sound ungrateful when I say, if you try to help me by opening that door, you will by default be creating 2 more. And I know it doesn't seem right and you don't want to do it, but if you just leave me to it, then I'll work my way through it. And please don't try to direct me in like some sonically guided missile. The thing is, this I'll miss. I'll get all tense and feel uptight. And you'll say left when you really meant right. And we'll end up too close in a space that's too tight. And I'll put out a hand to reach for the door and shit, grab your breast instead, which is really rather more than either of us wanted or bargained for. So honestly, the way you can help me best is give me some time and some space, and I'll take care of the rest. And please don't worry that I'm not going to manage the door. Believe me, it's a task I've achieved a million times before, sometimes with my cane in one hand, and coffee in the other, a laptop under my arm, and so far, touch wood, I've not come to any harm. This is also a world where everyone's trying to save time, dashing here, nipping there. But when I try dashing and nipping, I just end up crashing and tripping. And although face-planting lampposts does have some comic appeal, my face isn't fond of the feel of cold steel. So I'll take my time if that's okay. And yes, I will get in the way, but that's the way it goes. And yes, I will hold up the queue while I work out what I need to do. But if you want to offer me a helping hand, don't rush me, don't push me, just try to understand there are more ways than your way to get through a doorway. We're not all looking for the door. This is a world littered with edges. And for some of us, it's the edges that we're looking for. I'm hoping now that my audio wasn't muted during all that.
Whoop, 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 whoop.
Perfect. Thank you, Richard.
It's a good job. It's one I know well.
And we clap.
Yeah. You said, yeah, so hopefully, people can relate to that kind of feeling. The second piece that we wanted to show you is the winning poem from our first Speak Up for Difference poetry competition, which was won by Says Thomason, who is in the audience. Sorry.
I'm here.
Yeah, sorry. Yes, I think that might be.
I'll do it live.
I think so.
Yeah, what you're missing here, Richard, is stills of me gurning, and no one needs that in their lives.
Okay. Yes, if you don't mind, Says, we thought this was fabulous, and I'm sure people are going to relate to the experience that it portrays.
Well, this is based on a true story, and it's called Some Social Worth. So I'm sitting in this absence disciplinary, return to work support meeting. They don't like it when you use the wrong vocabulary because my absence record is higher than the targets they've set me. Key performance indicators. Targets seem harsh and unreasonable when you start trying to apply them to sick people, but KPIs, they're somehow less evil. And my employee file is thick with sick notes. Fit notes, as in fit to be working. A sick note's a letter to say that you're shirking, and that's the ever-lurking accusation. I'm faking, I'm lazy, but somewhere in that sheaf of notes is my official diagnosis: high-functioning autism. And everyone knows that first bit is bullshit. I'm barely functioning, and they wish I'd handed my notice, and I wish I'd handed my notice, but what that high-low distinction means is this person can probably hold down a job. Maybe not too high paid, nothing special, but they can earn a wage, even though they are lesser. Let them do something with spreadsheets. They'll like that better. And even though, they can say they're disabled, demand reasonable adjustments, like maybe a table in a quieter corner. If they say they can't cope, they can't work at all, well, tough. They're high functioning. No metric on a DWP form is ever going to find them wanting, let alone needing help. So this job, I have to do it. It will have to do, even though I know and they know I'm going to break down at my desk today, tomorrow, and all next week too. So I say to my boss as she looks through my notes, there's some things in the workplace I struggle to cope with because I'm autistic. She looks up as if I've just said something horrific. No, you're not. Well, that's news to me, and my brain doesn't like me to contradict people it sees as official, and this woman's holding a clipboard. But I'm pretty sure about this one, so I try again. No, you've had the letter from my assessment. I have autism. At this point, I'm guessing, which magical phrase do I need to impress her? No, you haven't. What you've got is Asperger's syndrome. Now, let me rewind. You'll have to excuse me. It's something my mind likes to do. No tangent unfollowed. But this information might well be new to you. Hans Asperger was a Nazi. And that's not hyperbole. I'm autistic, remember? So I'm talking literally Austria, Third Reich, master race Nazi. This is a man who sent disabled children to their deaths because think of the burden they would be on their parents. But apparently he made a groundbreaking discovery that some of us might not be as bad as we seem to be, that we might have our uses, have some social worth. And while the best thing for a drain on the state might be euthanasia, to euthanize us would basically be a waste of labour. And this man gave his name to a syndrome, a euphemistic, neat semantic trick that says, yes, you're autistic, but one of the good ones. Or, you're not autistic, that's only the ones who can't work, you know, the ones who are really disabled. It's a measure of worth, if your worth can be measured in wages. So I look at this woman, the distinction she's making, the boxes she's ticking, the language she's using, and my throat is aching with the scream that I'm swallowing, and my shoulders are hunching, holding in the panic attack, because that's what they mean by high functioning. That you can look without flinching into the eyes of someone who'll give you the name of a Nazi to make a linguistic distinction that you should be able to work. Because really, how else are you supposed to prove your worth? Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. So now we are coming to the discussion time. Let me just get to my notes. So we want to campaign as an organisation. We want to campaign on the issues that matter to you. We don't want to sit in a room and make them up ourselves. We'd like to hear what our community want us to work on. So rather than try to do that in one big group here, we are going to break out into breakout rooms. And that's just like it would be in a physical conference room. You will be moved into a smaller room with a smaller group of people where you will be able to chat, and what we'd like you to focus on is discuss in your group and see if you can come up with 3 to 5 priorities that you think difference could really make a difference with, that would really break down those barriers, that would really help you to live a fairer, more equal life in the Northeast. So you will need to nominate one of your group to give us some feedback when we all come back into the main room, and you will be moved back in. You'll get a warning that time is running out, and we'll bring everyone back, and then we'll share our thoughts, and that will really help us with planning our work over the next year. If it's okay, I'll start with our group, and Caroline is going to give some feedback from our group. And what we'll do is, we're not going to sort of scribe these up at the minute. Louise is going to take a few notes so that we make sure we've captured this, okay? Caroline, have you started recording again, please?
Yes, I have, yeah.
Cool.
So just very briefly, so one of the things that we talked about, built environments, but that's not just the physical environment, but it's also making changes and being flexible within if people need a quiet space or adaptations to lighting. So it's not just thinking about your ramps changing things. We also picked up there's a feeling that the term listed buildings is used as quite an excuse, and quite often the rooms that are more accessible are more expensive as well. So that was picked up as something. I've got some other notes around that I can add to that. I think filling in forms was also flagged. A number of people were saying that they have difficulties filling in forms and there isn't an alternative. they're either printed forms which are difficult or online forms, and actually getting help to just fill those forms in and the timescales in which they need to be returned as well. I think the other big one that came up is just, and I think it was Emma who mentioned it, about just that there's tend to be a joint connection between being disabled and benefits, and we just need to change that perception. But it also needs to be a changed perception. It's not apologies, Tanni, but it's not just about Paralympians, but people have an equal right to be within the community. And it was also flagged that it always feels like the disabled person has to do the running or the pushing or making suggestions rather than being met in the middle. So that was from us. I hope I've covered everything that we said very quickly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I think one further point was around communication. It links back to adjustment. Companies not providing information in accessible formats. So yeah, that was from our group. Second group 2. Do we know who that is?
Sorry, I was still on mute. It's Val, Richard.
Hello, Val.
Again, briefly, we talked about image and how we were always it was always a negative stereotype rather than our strengths. And again, like the last group, every time disability is mentioned, it seems it's mentioned in conjunction with benefits. There needs to be more balance about disabled people and their strengths, and not just about benefits. We talked about the sort of things that the buttons on the website. I had an enabling experience or I had a disabling experience, and I have to agree that are the enabling experiences because other people are enabling us, or are we enabling ourselves? That's a bit profound, that one. And John talked about whether we're given enough attention to mind and body. It seems to be always about the physical and not about the mind. So we need to look at how much attention we give to mind and body. Then we talked about COVID and the effect that's had. Probably in terms of access, it's been a positive because people are working from home. So access isn't an issue if we're all working from our own homes. And whether lessons could be learned from that for employers. But as David pointed out, we'll probably be doing more working from home in the future. So that was seen as a positive COVID. Not that COVID's could be anything positive, really. The other thing we talked about, the same as the other group, was about benefits. You know, we need to be shown in a positive light and not always about benefits.
Yeah.
And then we talked about, I've written down here, battleground, that the world of work tends to be a battleground for people with disabilities. But we also talked about once, post-COVID, if there ever is a post-COVID, that we set up a compact with employers for disabled people, with some of the bigger employer organisations like the North East Chamber of Commerce. And again, just generally about perceptions. Perceptions are like an overarching comment that came through all the time.
Yeah.
Can my colleagues confirm that that was about it?
Yeah, excellent.
Oh yes, yeah.
Well done, Val. Thank you.
Just quickly, just one other point as well. I think it was Diane that made it. Was just with regards to the COVID situation, and as much as we're lucky enough to be in lockdown in the northeast, but when we weren't, it was difficult for us to think about going out because of the likes of the toilets. We're kind of, all blocked out, and maybe if you're getting on the bus, they've kind of taped up the front seats, so you've got to battle your way down the bus to kind of get the seat and everything like that. So that was another area that we discussed in our group.
Lovely, thank you very much.
Could I add, I'd really like to emphasise how we talked about perspectives, and that if we just focus on the negatives, then people will remain of the same attitudes about us. They won't have, this is Ellie by the way, they won't have the option to learn more about disabled people, to see our strengths as well as our challenges. And those are the stories that we need to help people to empathise with us, that we're more than just benefits cases or problems or difficulties, or it's them shouting about the issues again and, seen as troublemakers and people who are wanting their rights met. When people are frightened, which is happening for everybody in this time, then they're not able to really find the resources to help and support other people. So we've got to dig even deeper to be able to tell those stories that help us.
Yeah.
And that's another onus on us at this difficult time. But unless we're able to do that, I don't think we'll make the changes we need.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great points. Okay, just conscious of time. Thank you. The group 3, can we have your feedback, please?
Okay, I think that's me, Richard. It's Caroline here. So we started off talking about the world of work, and we had lots of things in common. I'll not go through the same things as everybody else has said, but we felt that there was something about having greater access to technology and greater acceptance from employers who are willing to, not only to give people a try, but to make real proper adjustments, not just pay lip service. So we had the example from Says, who needed a quieter workspace, so was put in a cupboard that continued to be used as a cupboard, and often having that sort of battle, that feeling of needing to try and make a case for what you need is more stressful maybe than just carrying on putting up with things that weren't very good in the first place. And we also wanted, much like the other group, to ensure that some of the positive changes around working from home because of COVID could be continued once hopefully we come out of the other side of it, but also that we're very aware that the changes that have happened benefit those disabled people who have maybe the privilege of being digitally enabled and the resources and the skills to work in that way, and that we need to make sure we don't set up another divide for people who don't have that sort of access. Linked to that, but also in a wider sense, we talked about gaslighting. So a lot of what we've talked about this morning, the microaggressions, and some of the sense from your poem as well, Richard, and some of the discussions we've had are about just people chipping away at your confidence, and also, for instance, being told, that working in the cupboard is fine. why would that not satisfy your reasonable adjustments? It just chips away at your confidence, and therefore it's really important to have allies, genuine allies, and maybe having more than one disabled person in a group or a situation that can support you and say, yes, actually that did happen and it's not you. And again, linked to that, we felt that it was really important that training, and especially training young people, is delivered by disabled people. And we talk about also much more widely, we talk about our lived experience, but when we tell our stories, we tell it in our own way. We're not forced into boxes and to deliver training or to tell our stories to fit into a slot or a box that suits maybe the able body or the non-disabled world. And just as a final point, we just want to get to a position where we're not disabled people or other minority groups aren't a bolt-on. We're just part of people. We're just part of the normal core of human life and human experience. and we're not something, we're there from the beginning. We're not just something that's thought about as an afterthought.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So I'm really conscious of time, and we're a little bit behind. So can we have a quick sum up of feedback from the last group, and then we'll move on. But we don't want to miss stuff, but we can catch up afterwards with details.
Okay, so I'll feedback from our group.
Can I just talk to you very, very quickly so we can have a change of interpreter? Okay, wonderful. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so we talked about, a lot of similar issues. One was, a big one was an awareness. We talked about some practical things like the lighting being of poorer quality. We talked about the absence of disabled people within decision-making circles. Lisette interestingly raised the statistic that 25% of people in the Northeast are disabled, so that's 1 in 4. Really we need to be looking at that level of participation. And we also talked about, Lisette and I were really keen on a campaign to try and get a disabled person on every board. So we're kind of influencing practice at the very, very, root of decision making. And so we thought that was good. We talked about mentoring. And then Tanni talked about the disabled pay gap. The gender pay gap's talked about, the BAME is talked about, but nothing about the disabled pay gap. But then it was pointed out that there's not many people in the disabled employment market anyway, so that was a difficult thing. So those are those three things that we talked about: awareness, participation on boards, decision making, and disabled pay gap. Over to you, Richard.
Thank you. That was really, really interesting, and we'll capture those and use that feedback when we're planning our work over the coming months. So thank you for that. Now we're a little bit behind time, but people are probably getting hungry. But I'm really delighted that we can welcome Baroness Tanni Grey-Thompson back to give our keynote speech. Tanni is our patron. You may know Tanni from her time as one of Britain's most successful Paralympic athletes, if my notes are correct, winning 11 golds, 4 silvers and a bronze over 5 Paralympic Games. We did have a video clip, but I think we're going to skip that because I want to get onto to hear what Tanni has to say about disability inequality. And so really delighted that she's found time to speak to us. So over to you, Tanni.
Thank you very much. And probably slight apologies to the interpreters for this, because I do talk really quickly, so I'm going to try and slow it down. But also, I wrote my comments on Thursday, so we've been talking about some of the things today. So I'm not going to jump through too much, but just to let the interpreters know that I might see some of the bits that I was going to talk about. So it's been really amazing to be able to meet everybody today. And, what's been amazing about today is that, while the pandemic has been devastating for so many disabled people, the flexible working has been amazing. If you'd asked me 6 months ago whether we'd be able to do something in this way, I never would have believed it. But what's amazing, disabled people have been asking for flexible working for years and it doesn't happen. And a group of non-disabled people want it and everything seems possible. And one of the things that I think is really important is we think about some of the good things that we've learned from this time and things that have happened differently in lockdown, and how we can give people the opportunity to carry on working differently. We don't know what the future is going to hold. I mean, lockdown is changing daily. But I think never has it been more important for disabled people to have a voice in society. And that's partly why I'm delighted to be involved with Difference North East. And, with the hashtag Everyday Ableism, I think it's really important that we all get to talk about it so that non-disabled people see the reality of our lived experience. I haven't really been out in lockdown. I'm not shielding, but no, I don't want to catch coronavirus. But I did venture out last week, and it's what I mentioned earlier, my tolerance for people being patronised towards me has just completely gone. I was at an event and I was following a group of non-disabled people at a distance, and found they were all stepping over low cones which had plastic tape on. And there were quite a lot of disabled people at this event. It was actually an event, a sporting event for disabled people. But the only one who was disabled by the barrier was us wheelchair users. And I lifted the cone and was twice asked by someone whether I needed help. Both times I really politely declined. And then the individual came over, and this is something that every single person here will have experienced. The individual came over and took the cone out of my hands as I was holding it. And with as much politeness as I can muster, I said, I don't need any help, I just need access. And I thought actually that might help them understand and learn, and I was completely mistaken. And a really sarcastic voice, they said, well, sorry for trying to help you. And I was a guest at the event and decided that actually not to take it further then and there. I'm still, a week and a bit later, still trying to compose an email to the organiser. But this has been a really big debate for me in lockdowns, you know, about is it my job to make a non-disabled person feel better for patronising me and being rude? And it's made me realise that I've done this for a really, really long time. And it is difficult because I think there is a line, because if you do react, then you've got a chip on your shoulder. And then if you don't react, you're complicit in what they're doing and how that behaviour continues. And I've not found an adequate answer to deal with this. But what I knew was that my sense of humour and my use of humour around this is gone, because all through my life when people have said to me, people like you, and it comes with a pointy finger, so people like you can't do that. My response for a long time has been, what do you mean Welsh people? And if I'm honest, sometimes it has made people realise at some point in the conversation that, you know, what they'd said, and it sometimes is moderated behaviour. And of course, sometimes it didn't. But it allowed me to not show my anger at the situation that I was in and try and control it. Obviously, with this, you know, there's everyone has their own personal experiences, and we have to allow for people to make some genuine errors of judgment. But I've been trying to think about what point we call this out. And this is something I've been thinking about an awful lot in lockdown, is the voice of disabled people. How do we amplify the experience of disabled people to bring about real change? Because a massive frustration of mine, and it goes back to 2012, and it was the most amazing Olympics and Paralympics, but lots of non-disabled people tell me it changed the world for disabled people. And I used to be an athlete. It changed my life. It didn't change the lives of disabled people. It changed the lives of a few Paralympians. And we need to be really open and honest about that, because disability hate crime against children and adults has doubled in recent years. And that is with the Crown Prosecution Service saying it's underreported and it's not properly defined. So the additional tariff that comes with it is not applied. And I don't often look back, but it made me look back a bit more to my own history. I became paralysed at 5. I've been a wheelchair user for a long time. And I have seen really positive opportunities change in that time. But I went to mainstream school because I could walk when I started school, and then I got paralysed. But it's because my parents threatened to sue the Secretary of State for Wales for my right to access mainstream education that I got into mainstream school. And has it changed? No, I'm still dealing with cases of disabled children who are excluded from education. The Academies Bill actually allows academies to refuse to take disabled children. Back in the dim and distant days, I remember having impossible ramps to use to get onto trains and sit in this guard's van. But I never worried about being left on a train, which I do now. And, you know, when I was doing my A-levels, I was told by a careers advisor there was no point in me going to university because the best job I could ever hope for was answering phones. I had quite a strong discussion with him about how wrong he was. I got told off by my teacher, and then when I explained, my teacher was like, yeah, fine, go for it. As it turns out, my first job after graduating was answering phones, but because it was flexible and it fitted around my sporting career. And then sort of moving on to the 90s, I remember doing interviews when the Disability Discrimination Act was passed, and saying that I would have preferred an Equality Act because I thought that, but accept the DGA, but thought any legislation was better than what we'd had before. It turns out the Equality Act, the recently departed chair of the Equality and Human Rights Commission has said the Equality Act has done a huge disservice for disabled people. But then the first board I sat on as a young person was I sat on the National Disability Council, which oversaw the implementation of the Disability Discrimination Act. It was a massive learning curve for me. And I was promised that in January the 1st this year, all trains would be accessible. I remember being quite excited. And, on my campaigning, I've tried to be sort of sensible and calm and, do be a bit edgy at times. But the final straw for me, I think, and this is how I am where I am, is I sat in a meeting in January this year when a non-disabled person who's involved in train companies told me that, Tanni, you just need to be a bit patient. And that was the point I decided where I was over being patient. I don't know whether it's an age thing or, just having to wait a really long time for these things. But this is the bit where it means it's really important time for disabled people. We've got to push on to make a difference. And I am optimistic because I work in an institution, the House of Lords, that hasn't changed much in 400 years. And because of the pandemic, we've gone online. An institution that is based on us being present has meant that we can work from home. And that's where I think that we need to be optimistic about the future. And if we look at COVID, it feels like a really long time ago that the compulsory do not resuscitate orders were put on to disabled people who had no underlying health conditions. Shielding has taken disabled people out of view. You're 11 times more likely to die of COVID if you're disabled. And earlier figures said that 25% of people who died have been disabled. The Office of National Statistics have released figures this week that said it's now 59% of those who died are disabled. One of the interesting things about the pandemic is now non-disabled people have to book a seat on a train and not allowed to travel without booking a seat like we have to. I kind of had hoped my campaigning would raise our bar to theirs, not lowered their bar to us. But that's the opportunity for us to talk about things. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done on Care Act easements. We've talked about employment. Companies have not employed more disabled people in the last 2 years. They've just widened their definition of disabled people to encompass a much bigger group of people. And we really have to push to talk about pay gap, because when companies actually admit that they can't report the pay gap, that makes them look really hard at the number of people, disabled people that they employ. We need more disabled people in public life. There's quite a few disabled people in the Lords. Our percentages are good. Some of it is acquired impairment, some of it's age, but we need more disabled people as councillors, and we need the fund. We need to push the government hard to ensure the funding's there to do that. And I said this earlier, we shouldn't just tell young disabled children, do you want to be a Paralympian? We don't go to every non-athletic looking, non-sporty, non-disabled person who doesn't like sport and say, do you want to be an Olympian? So let's not do that to Paralympians. And something I feel really strongly about is inspiration porn. When I was young, I didn't actually experience much discrimination being an athlete. I did have someone once say that wheelchair racing was really unfair because it depended on how fast the person who was who pushed you. I had to explain that it didn't work like that. I had a little bit of do you train, but inspiration porn around our disabled athletes has the potential to really turn back the clock. And something I'm really, really keen to look at is creeping up where non-disabled actors play disabled people on screen, whether that's Ironside. Do you know what, the next person who calls me Ironside? I'm so over that. But this shows my age, whether it's Sandy Richardson or Chris Tate, or the Bond villains, or whoever it is. What we also need to look at is the intersectionality of this, because quite often it's men. There's very few disabled female characters. Liz Carr in Silent Witness as a disabled person is one of the few that we do see. But I got into a conversation a little while ago with whoever runs Dwayne Johnson's Twitter feed, when they talked about his film Skyscraper. I don't know if it was him or not, but his films aren't believable, and I love them, really, because you don't have to concentrate too hard. But the discussion went that Dwayne had been inspired by meeting disabled veterans and decided to play an amputee character to open up the film world and to hope it, gave more hope and an aspiration to disabled people, and that more disabled people would get to work in films. We were having a great conversation until I said, in your next film, will you commit to employing a disabled person? And it went quiet. I really don't think it's too much to ask, not just because, it's wrong, but because actually their portrayal is just not often very good. And I'm a bit tired of all the films that feature cripping up or heartwarming and uplifting, and it usually means the story's about pity of a disabled person, but they're not allowed to be involved in the writing, directing, or behind the scenes. So I know all this seems a whole list of moans, but actually, for me, it's important to try and articulate all these things, to think about all the different things that we need to change and the different levers that we need to bring. I'm really lucky in that I've travelled around the world and I've seen a lot of the way disabled people are treated in other countries. And we are, to some extent, lucky that we have some of the support we do. But it's not enough. It's not enough to say where we are is okay and we haven't done enough. And we have to educate younger disabled people, who some of the young disabled people I've spoken to recently, because we have a sort of vaguely accessible toilet and a vaguely accessible train system, think that we're done, and we're so not done. But the other reason I'm optimistic is because the group of people are here today. It means we can, for us to be hopeful, and it's time for us to step up and bring about change and not step away and think that it's done. Anyway, that's enough from me this morning. Thank you for listening to that. I'll put my email address in the chat group. So if anybody wants to have a further conversation, or if you think there's anything that I can do in Parliament that it's different from what I'm doing now, I would really, really love to hear from you. And congratulations to Richard and Chris and everyone who's done everything today to make it happen, because this is about how we can bring about change in the North East and beyond. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Tanni. Some really just lots of stuff there for us to think about, and I certainly relate to a lot of that. I have a poem called "I'm Not a Paralympian," which I'm not going to do now. Don't worry, but it just really recognised that kind of sometimes there's media hype and the culture that reinforces. But also lots of those issues we're starting to make to try to influence in this region through our campaigning. And I would encourage people to go to a website and look at our campaigns and where you can lend support and share that information. Right, before I say too much more, I'm going to hand over to Caroline MacDonald, who is going to close the session for us.
Thank you, Richard. I'll be very brief, but there's something that occurred to me today that we used to talk a lot about in the 80s and 90s in the disability movement, which was about having this space where we could come together as disabled people and feel empowered by each other and reinvigorated, ready to go back out into the world, where we knew we were going to face the microaggressions, sometimes the much bigger hate crime incidents and the things that made us feel small. So we could build ourselves up through being in a space with like-minded people and feel hardened and ready for the fight that we knew we would have to face once we went through our front door. Well, today I've had a huge dose of that. I feel so inspired by the speakers that we've had and the opportunity to talk to other disabled people, and also feel incredibly proud of all of the work and effort that everybody's put in at Difference to get us to this space, and excited and enthused for the future, because I just feel that now we've made this really important start. We've got a good foundation, something to build on, and we can really campaign and make a difference in the lasting change. And I'd like to invite everybody here to join us with that, and become members, because together we will be stronger and have a stronger voice. and help us shape the work that we're going to do in the future. I'd just like to finish by saying a few thank yous to everybody who's participated today, all of our contributors and all of the people who've joined us. It's been a really remarkable event. And I'd like to say a very special thank you as well to Richard, who's pulled all of us together. What a tremendous job you've done. Thank you, Richard. And just to finish, please go to our website, join up, help us in our work as we go forward, and we look forward to a much brighter and more positive future in the North East. Thank you.
Thanks, Caroline. That's it, and apologies we're running late, but I hope it's been worth it, and we will leave the session open for a few minutes just to let people say their goodbyes and leave any final comments. And we are recording, so we will work out a way to get that online as well. But thanks very much for coming. And can we unmute folk?
People need to unmute themselves, unfortunately.
Okay, yeah.
Brilliant.
Well done,
Thank
Richard.
Thank you, Richard.
Great.
Thanks, Richard.
Thank you.
I'll stop recording now, should I?
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Cheers, Rob.